Hello, everyone, and welcome back. This is part two of our exploration into the Dyatlov Pass mystery. In the previous episode, Jane introduces to all the people in the story, and we started on their journey. And in today's episode, we're going to be completing that journey, or what is known of it. So, thank you for listening, and I hope you guys enjoy it.
And then January 29th, the group also spent the night near the Ospia River. And in their diaries, they mentioned that it's Yuri Doroshenko's 21st birthday today, so they probably celebrated a bit. January 30th, the group started hiking at around 9:30 a.m. The weather is getting colder. They followed a deer trail that soon ended. The trees are thinning as they are ascending above the tree line, and they can feel the altitude change. They stop for lunch at 2 p.m., stop for the night at 5 p.m. I think that's when it's getting dark at that time of the year
Yeah.
up there. Nikolai and Luda were arguing over chores or chores? Chores, right?
Chores. Yeah.
Okay. Over chores because apparently both of them sat down by the fire before all of the chores were done, and that was frowned upon. So they argued about who was going to saw the tent eventually. I don't know, they needed to saw the tent apparently. Nikolai gave in and Luda disappeared into the tent. I don't know, maybe to pout. Wasn't elaborated on that. Yuri's extra coat and mittens, the one that he gave the group. Oh, wait a second. Was it? Yeah, who knows if they're talking about Yuri Yudin or Yuri Doroshenko. Somebody's extra coat and mittens got burned, but the incident is no further explained. In Sina's diary, she mentions that they are going to build a storage site soon, where they would leave extra gear to lighten their loads for the summit up the mountain. After the summit, they return and pick their stuff up again, which was a very common practice back then.
Okay.
So it's easier to summit with lighter gear and stuff like that. So you
Yeah,
don't
of
have to
course.
bring everything. So this is interesting. The group celebrates Alexander's birthday today and gives him a tangerine. They split into 8 parts and shared with the group.
Yay.
It's unknown. It's unknown why he told the group his birthday was today because his actual birthday is November 16th.
Oh,
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, uh, maybe he just wanted to be funny and also celebrate his birthday.
that's very
The
strange.
paranormal people who speculate about this case says, oh, he knew that he's going to die, and that's why he wanted to celebrate his birthday one last time. I'm a real skeptic. I don't
Yeah.
believe that, but that's just my theory. I think maybe he was just fooling around, joking, and also wanted to celebrate his birthday right now, just maybe being funny. Who knows?
That is weird, though.
I know, I know. It's kind of weird. Nobody knows why he's done that.
Okay.
There are theories about that, some others as well. I don't know. We'll get to that
I
point.
mean, in those days, he might not have actually known when his actual birthday was. And I don't mean.
It wasn't his passport. He should have known.
Okay, that's different then.
Yeah. You have a point though. You're right. So
But I was thinking
sometimes
maybe his parents had just like, I don't know, maybe he just didn't grow up with his parents, didn't know when his actual birthday was. But okay, that kind of, if it's on his
yeah, that's
passport.
very common and
Yeah.
you have a point. But yeah, you're like maybe in his passport something was differently was noted, but I think the investigators would have taken that into consideration and clarified that.
Yeah.
But like I said, nobody knows.
Okay.
Um the writer of the Unknown Diary states that Nikolai started writing into a diary as well, but that one has never been found. So it's unclear, and it's also unclear why he started writing that one day, because his entries in the group diaries they've always been the shortest and only consisted of 1 or 2 sentences. And there's one diary where he just, gives one sentence about the hike, like something, everything is good, and um, then later on, and the second sentence was I tried but I can't, something like that. So he just didn't want to write in the group diary, and so it's people say it's not typical for him um to write his own diary, and also that thing was never found again, like I said.
Okay.
uh Maybe he just said he would start a diary and never did. Who knows? So the January 30th entry was the last one in both Sina's and the Unknown Diary. The Unknown Diary, where nobody knows who it belongs to. But in the very last page of Sina's diary is a single word, which is Rempel. And Rempel is the name of a local hunter. I think that's a very interesting aspect of the whole thing. Keep that in mind.
Yeah.
What is also interesting is that is the name of the hunter that Igor talked to in the logging camp. So that was the hunter who he spoke to before he changed his mind and said, "Well, we're probably going to take 2 extra days."
Yeah. Okay. So this is like
So
2 days later, and he's you could if they've met him again, then maybe that he's been following them.
um, maybe they met him again along the way. There's some other things that might point into that direction I'm going to talk about again, but nobody's certain. And also that Rempel guy, that hunter, was questioned by police, and um, apparently there was nothing suspicious about him. Maybe he had an alibi. I have no idea, no idea.
Okay.
But like I said, I think it's weird that she noted the name.
Hmm.
It could have been several reasons. Maybe she just wanted to remember, like maybe they were becoming friends and she was like, "Oh, let me write down your name. I don't know. I'm gonna come visit you someday again."
or she forgot what his name was, and then throughout that day, somebody had told her, "Oh yeah, his name was Rubel." Did you say? And then she just wrote it down in a diary so she could remember that.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
possibly. Yes, it doesn't have to be anything suspicious.
Yeah. Okay.
Just noting it because it's weird that she wrote it in the very last page, but not on the last page, like the last entry, but like on the back cover. The last page of the notebook.
Yeah. Okay.
She wrote it down, so it's not clear when she wrote it down.
Oh,
Could
okay.
have been the day they were at the camp as well.
Yeah.
So, like I said, that's where the entries of Sina's diary and the unknown diary ended. January 31st. This is the last entry in the group diary. Igor wrote it, and he mentions that the weather is a bit worse, and the snow probably comes from the pines because the sky is perfectly clear. So maybe the wind just blew it off. Apparently, they took the same sled trail they followed the day before, and Igor casually mentions that the trail was crossed by a deer hunter not long ago. And I told you to remember Hunter and,
Hmm.
and Remper, the name she wrote down. He writes, quote, "Yesterday we apparently came across his resting stop, the hunter's resting stop. The deer didn't go much further. The hunter didn't follow the beaten trail, and we are now in his steps," end quote. It's also mentioned that it was warm and dry in the tent despite the low temperature of -18 to -24 degrees. Imagine how cold that is.
Well, I know
I mean,
exactly how
you live
cold
in
that
Canada.
is.
Yeah, I know. Now imagine you're living in a tent.
Yeah,
Wow.
and with the
In the
wind
cold all
and the
day.
wind chill as well would make it much worse. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's very cold.
He also says, quote, "Walking was especially hard today. Visibility is very low. We can't see the trail," end quote. Another quote, "We gradually leave the Aspire Valley. The rise is continuous but quite smooth. Wind is western, warm, penetrating. The speed of the wind is similar to the air draft created by taking off airplane.
Oh God.
Probably quite strong."
Yeah.
Um, I think it's also interesting that he says he can't see the trail. Some people say it might have been so windy, maybe like blizzard-like, and they just got lost. But we'll come to that later. He also writes, quote, "I can't even start thinking of setting up a storage. It's close to 4 p.m. We have to start looking for a place to pitch the tent. We're going south in the Ospia River Valley," which is weird. Now they're in the valley again. This apparently is a place covered with the deepest snow. Wind is not strong. Snow cover is 1.22 meters. Tired and exhausted, we started the preparations for the night. Not enough firewood. Frail, damp furs. We started fire with logs, too tired to dig a fire pit. We had supper right in the tent. It's warm. Uh, and he also says, "It is hard to imagine such a comfort somewhere on the ridge with a piercing wind hundreds kilometers away from human settlements." End quote. And that was the last diary entry. Um, the thing is the storage. He says, "I can't even start thinking of setting up a storage. It's close to 4 p.m. and that they're going to pitch the tent and all that stuff. And also that they're too tired to even dig a fire pit. So I don't think that they set up a storage site that day. but the next day because a storage site was eventually found.
Okay.
So that's important when you need try to determine when they died and when whatever happened. Um, February 1st, the group usually wrote in their diaries in the evening after dinner. Sometimes they took notes throughout the day, but since there are no more entries after January 31st, people assume that something must have happened before they could write the entry on February 1st in the evening because food was found in the tent. Some people believe that something must have happened during dinner on February 1st. Or in the night from February 1st to 2nd.
Okay.
There were pieces of meat, bread, crackers, and a sandwich, a cup of cocoa, etc. At some point during their last day, they must have set up a storage site, like I said, because it was eventually found. From now on, nothing has ever been heard from the group. So everything that happens from now on is not from their point of view anymore. February 12th. Because Yuri Yudin passed the message that the Dyatlov group would probably need 2 extra days, nobody was concerned when there was no telegram of the group yet. Meanwhile, the Blinov group returned and reported heavy snowfall in the region. Now, here's a side note from me. The Blinov group returned on February 12th, even though they said that their hike is going to take 25 days. So, almost 10 days longer than the Dyatlov group. And the Dyatlov group would have returned on February 14th.
Yeah.
Don't you think that's weird?
So they returned a lot earlier.
Yeah. I mean, nobody ever, wherever I researched, nobody ever seemed to take note of that detail, or nobody seemed to be worried, so maybe that's not of significance. Maybe it's just a simple explanation. Maybe they said, there was so much snow, we decided to turn around because it was impossible to do, to finish the hike. But it was just nowhere mentioned, and so I just think it's weird that they returned on February 12th already, and nobody bats an eye, like, okay, yeah, well, welcome back.
Yeah, one thing it does say is that something changed. So either
Yes.
they ran around it really quickly, which is very unlikely, or they had to turn around. And why would you ever turn around? I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but only if it got
Yeah.
too dangerous or somebody got injured,
Yeah.
or sick, right?
Yeah, but nothing like that was mentioned. That's what
No.
that
So
and
I'd have to agree. I think that's something that could be questioned, especially on a
yeah.
mountain at the same time as 8 people died.
Yeah. Exactly. And so I think as long as I don't have proof that they left the mountain because it was too dangerous because of the snow or somebody got injured, I personally I suspect them a little bit, but that's just my opinion. Don't get biased. Just me that was just a suspicious detail that nothing was ever mentioned about that part, but I just think that it was so weird and I just noticed it. I couldn't help but notice that they're so early.
Okay.
Anyway, so February 17th to February 20th, I shortened this part a bit. So Luda's and Alexander's families were concerned and called the UPI administration. The families were assured that the group would be fine, but after a few more days, the families contacted the Sverdlovsk city committee. I think that's a fun word, demanding answers. The committee and the UPI held an emergency meeting and ultimately decided that it's time to do something and send out a search party. The search party consisted of UPI students, instructors, and experienced winter outdoorsmen. So back then, there weren't any professional search parties. It was usually just volunteers, just a side note.
Okay.
February 21st to February 25th, search flights were launched. Officials provided search dogs, two-way radios, and sent in local professional forest rangers as well. Also, Mansi trackers joined the search teams. Um, Searches were dropped off by helicopter in various locations, and search teams found several different ski trails and started following them. February 26th, Boris Lobtsov and his search group found the campsite.
That's on the 26th of February.
Yes.
Wow. Okay, so that's a long time. Well,
Yeah, very long
almost
time.
a full month. Okay.
So this is an original picture of how the tent was found. So Boris Loptov and his search group found the campsite on February 26th or 27th. I'm not entirely sure. I apparently noted two different dates. I'm very sorry.
Okay, well, it's
Um,
still
so,
a long time afterwards.
yeah. The tent was collapsed but visible, like you see in the picture.
Yeah.
Um, the entrance of the tent was facing south, and the north side was covered with 15 to 20 centimeters of snow. And because of the density and general appearance, it was concluded that the snow was blown against the tent by the wind and not caused by an avalanche, which is still a popular theory out there. Another thing that speaks against an avalanche is a pair of skis sticking upright in the snow next to the tent, and because they didn't move, and also how the items in the tent were found. Like delicate items such as crackers were completely intact. A cup of cocoa was found standing upright and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
they quickly decided against the avalanche theory. Um, According to one source, the front entrance was half open, and that one source is just a book. Um, but there are no official files that would confirm this statement. So nowhere in any file was it mentioned that the entrance was found like that. The only thing mentioned was that the front entrance had wooden buttons. So at least we know it wasn't a zipper or something like that. Um, Now, the side of the tent, facing downslope, showed several long and big cuts. Now, the official protocol report on the tent from the Dyatlov group says the following. Campsite is located on the northeast slope of mountain 1079, which is Khalad Yaku. They just had numbers back then. At the source of River Auspia. Campsite is located 300 meters from the top of the mountain, 1079, on a slope of 30 degree. Campsite consists of a pad of flattened snow. On the bottom are stacked 8 pairs of skis for tent support and insulation. Tent is stretched on poles and fixed with ropes. At the bottom of the tent, 9 backpacks were discovered with various personal items, jackets, raincoats, 9 pairs of shoes. Remember that, 9 pairs of shoes.
Okay.
There were also found men's pants and 3 pairs of boots, warm fur coats, socks, hat, ski caps, utensils, buckets, stove. The stove was found, axe, saw, blankets, lots of food just lying around, notebooks, and many small items and documents, camera, and accessories for a camera. And then they say the nature and form of all cuts suggests that they were formed by contact with the canvas inside of the tent with the blade of some weapon, presumably a knife. I'm going to quote the website here. They say Vladimir Korotayev, who in 1959 was a young investigator, recalling the events of that time, said that major break in the case was made by almost by accident. A woman was called to help mending his uniform, and she took one look at the tent when they sent it off to the office to investigate, and spoke with confidence that the cuts were made from inside. This changed the course of the investigation entirely. Forensic analysis confirmed the cuts were indeed made from the inside. The examination was conducted in Svetlov's forensic laboratory 3rd to 16th April 1959 by senior forensic expert Henrietta Elisevna Churkina. Sorry. And some cuts from the inside didn't make it all the way through. Now I'm gonna send you a picture from the tent, what it looked like with the cuts in that examination room. And that is something that's the first thing that makes this case so incredibly mysterious, because nobody quite knows why they would cut up their tent from the inside.
No. Unless
Because I
somebody.
imagine something happening and somebody cuts it open from the outside, or somebody trying to get in, or maybe an animal. But it's just, yeah, it's confirmed that that was made from the inside.
I mean, the only way I can think of it is that somebody, a threat was coming in from the front of the tent. Some people delayed it at the front of the tent, and the rest tried to escape by cutting the tent and
Yeah,
jumping out. That's kind of how I would interpret that, because otherwise you would. I mean, the tent's one of their most important bits of gear. They would never cut it
exactly.
without an emergency.
Yeah. And they were, like I said, experienced hikers. They knew exactly and very well how important that tent was. And I mean, they've sewn a couple of holes in the tent before, but they were certainly not that big, because that's just something the tent is ruined. You could
No.
possibly not yeah, he couldn't just continue with the hike from then on with such a tent.
Okay.
So that says a lot, I think. The threat must have been extremely great, and that's something that witnesses confirm later on as well. Otherwise, they wouldn't leave their tent. And well, so near the entrance of the tent was found the satirical propaganda leaflet that Dyatlov group put together at the night of the incident. It's called Evening Otorten. So Otorten is the mountain. The content of this document is an indicative of the mood inside the group and the fact they had the time to write it. So the thing is, you gotta imagine it like this. The original was never found, just to mention that. There is a typewritten copy, though, in the files. And it's something like the group made up, like, I don't know, like fake headlines, satirical headlines, just to be funny and to have a good time, you know?
Okay.
So just some headlines from the mountain, basically. And the thing, though, is that one of those headlines that were supposed to be funny and just lighten the mood, or something like "Now we know where the snowman lives," or something like that. And that just fueled so many Yeti theories. It's incredible. Just that one sentence they wrote down, probably just to lighten the mood and have some fun.
Because that's the sort of joke you would make you be like, oh, I wonder if we'll see any Yetis up there.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah, and just some joking around like now we know where he lives, and or maybe they just refer to someone in the group as a snowman because maybe they were covered in snow
Yeah.
like early on and had a frozen mustache and they called him snowman. Who knows? There's so many explanations, and Yeti is one that I would never consider.
No.
All right, so on the side of the tent, on top of 10 centimeters of snow, laid Dyatlov's flashlight, which was made in China. I don't know if that's important. Boris Slobtsov picked it up and turned it on. The flashlight was in working condition, um, but it was turned off at the time they found it. So nobody used that as, I don't know, a light source to find back to the camp or something like that. So from Slobtsov witness testimony, um, there's a quote, and he says, "We couldn't understand why the snow under the flashlight was 10 centimeters thick, yet there wasn't any on the flashlight itself." And he has a point.
Yeah.
Because the tent couldn't have, I don't know, couldn't have been there for long.
No.
And when the flashlight was put on top of it, but there was already, it was standing long enough to gather some snow on top of it until somebody put a flashlight
Yeah. So
on
that's
there.
somebody coming after the tent had collapsed. Then the flashlight goes on there. Or
Possible, yeah.
yeah. Mm.
So another thing is Igor's coat was just outside the tent entrance. In the pockets were a pocket knife and a picture of Sina. So yeah, they left their coat and outer clothing, which is very important in the cold, just next to the tent or in the tent. Just also keep that in mind. In the tent, the searchers also found money. So it is assumed that the group didn't get robbed since the money wasn't stolen. That's what people consistently say throughout, I don't know, the reports and discussions, is that nobody believes they were robbed because so much money was left behind.
Right.
Some people believe that the tent was not set up properly and thus caused issues later on, or might be a hint that something was off. But a lot of other experienced hikers from the search party stated that the tent was set up like it should be and very professionally. So the sources vary, or the witness testimonies vary, but like I said, many professional hikers or experienced hikers said it was properly done. So who knows?
Okay.
It isn't clear whether the stove was assembled or disassembled. The sources disagree on this one, but it looked like it was not lit this evening and nothing looked burned inside the tent. So it probably couldn't have been the stove that caught on fire or anything. What could have been is, people discuss and say maybe some dangerous fumes got inside the tent and they had to evacuate. But on the other hand, um, nobody would cut so many holes in that tent just because it's, I don't know, maybe they would have, but they
No,
could have just opened the tent maybe.
you just go out the front door. Yeah. It's like,
Yeah.
and I think didn't they say that they had like skis and stuff holding the tent to the ground. So I think there might have been like small gaps underneath the tent anyway. So they could have like, if they really wanted to, they could have just like lifted up a little bit and gone out of the tent. I'm not certain of that, but that's where I read it when they said that they were using the skis at the bottom of the tent just to hold it down, maybe because it was pegged in as well. Because often tents weren't enclosed like they are today.
Well, this one is, if you look at the second picture, that where you can see the cuts, you can see that it
Yeah,
has a like a floor,
it does kind of look like that. Yeah.
and underneath that there were the skis, just to make an even, an even space for the tent to put down.
Oh, maybe okay, maybe that way then. All right.
But the thing is, I don't know, maybe that theory is correct, because even if you want to go through the front entrance, it was kind of crammed in there because they were on top of their backpacks, is what I read. And imagine one person at a time trying to get out of the tent and the ones in the back almost suffocating because of the fumes. So it could be, I don't know, and they maybe decided that. But on the other hand, they would have just gone back after everything went out, tried to maybe um, sew it back together, or at least get their winter clothing and boots out of the tent. So that
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
make much sense.
No,
But
it's
like I said, there's many people disagree on this one. They don't know if it was assembled or disassembled. There are many sources. Everyone says something else. It's quite difficult. But nothing looked like it was burned. That's the most important thing. So according to the official website, it has very recently been found out that the tent was actually discovered on February 24th by two other members of the search party now. Keep that in mind. And both of them just didn't tell anybody. So everybody's frantically looking for this tent, and those two who find it just don't check what's inside. There could have been somebody inside who needed help, so they don't check and return to the camp and don't tell anyone.
well, that's what I was thinking about with the torch. Maybe someone had come afterwards, had a look through their stuff, and just thrown the torch on top.
That was Igor's flashlight, though. Apparently, I think Yuri Yudin helped identifying, and
Yeah,
it
so
was
but
mentioned that it
maybe
was his.
maybe they were looking through Igor's stuff in the tent and thought, oh, we don't need this torch, and just thrown it. I don't know.
Oh yeah, yeah,
But then
sure,
when you
yeah,
said the
of
money
course.
wasn't taken, I was like, okay, well that's a bit weird then.
Yeah, it's still weird that they wouldn't tell anybody,
Yeah,
even
yeah,
if they
that
didn't take anything.
yeah. They were out there
I
looking
mean,
for them, and they found the tent, and they're like, don't know, could be anybody's.
yeah, I mean, there are speculations out there, and people say the only reason why could have been that they might have, made some things disappear, like some diaries.
Yeah,
Um, I don't know. There is a lot of things missing, and it's, to be honest, I think back back then in Russia, I think it was very um, possible that people just let things disappear because it just didn't. Yeah. The thing is, though, that also, I don't know, the Russian government back then would have never admitted that they don't know what happened to somebody like that, or they don't have a clue, or would have never admitted that something gone wrong or something like that. So it was very likely that they would just make things disappear.
yeah,
I don't know. I don't want to accuse them of something or anything, just saying that this was possible and very common back then.
yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
Now let's go back to the timeline. On the same day, footprints were discovered near the tent, leading down slope. So I'm gonna show you a picture of the footprints as well.
Are they Yeti shaped?
No,
Damn, that's my theory gone.
there are many more footprint pictures on the website. I decided to pick this one because you can see the most on that picture, I think. The
Okay,
most footprints, the clearest picture, I think.
that looks like more than one person, right?
Yeah, definitely. So on the footprints, there are many different sources saying many different things about the footprints. Even on the official website, because the witnesses said different things about them. Now, some say the footprints started right next to the tent. Some say they started 30 to 40 meters down the slope. And they explain this with the Dyatlov group using the snow from around the area to put it under the tent, and pat it down, so make it flat and an even surface.
Yeah.
And so they say that's why the snow around the tent was kind of light and blown away by the snow later on. So even if there were footprints, they think they were just carried away. That's their explanation.
Okay.
But here's a quote from, I don't know if it was a witness, but it's the quote from Atmanaki's testimony. I don't know who that is. Quote, there were no footprints right around the tent because when the Dyatlov group dug, so probably for the tent, they had stacked the snow all around, and later this snow was drifted by the wind, thus covering all the tracks. 30 or 40 meters down, there was a file, probably a pile of very well preserved footprints.
Okay.
That's what he says. And Maslenikov stated, he was also team of the search party, we managed to identify footprints of 8 or 9 people, starting from the tent and going about 1 kilometer down the slope. And then they were lost. One person was in boots, the others were only in socks and barefoot.
Okay. So
Slavtsov
everybody
said,
escaped their tent without their shoes, like you said earlier.
yeah, exactly. And it's the other major weird thing about this case. Slavtsov said there were footprints of bare feet, but in socks, somewhere from Valenki. And Valenki are those like I think very thin felt or leather shoes for
Okay.
hiking, like keep warm, and you could put ski boots over them, I believe. I'm not entirely sure.
Okay.
And but they weren't thick or anything, so they didn't protect you properly from the cold, I think. And occasionally we could make out the tread of a ski boot. All of these prints were raised higher than the actual wind scored surface of the slope. We followed these prints from the tent in the direction of a spreading cedar. Is that cedar? Is the tree? Is that pronounced cedar?
Cedar, yes.
Yeah, cedar tree, which was clearly prominent on the hill. First we lost, and then we found the tracks again. They appeared again in the birch tree undergrowth, and then they went down along the ravine, which led to the Lotsva River. Now, the reason why many witnesses and members of the search team mention barefoot footprints is because those look different from natural footprints. Like a footprint by somebody with shoes would leave an indent in the snow. When somebody is walking barefoot, though, the warmth of the body melts the snow, and the melted snow would then freeze. When the wind naturally blows some snow away from around the footprints, the frozen footprint remains in place, and it looks like a column. And I think you can see that in the picture on the ones on the bottom right,
Yeah,
or
I
in the
see.
center of the picture at the bottom. There's like footprints that are like a column,
Yeah, I see. I
and
mean,
that's how people explain it.
I find it a little bit strange that this is almost a full month later
Hmm.
and they can still find footprints at the top of a mountain in February. Like I don't
Yeah,
know
you're
what the
not the
weather
only one.
I don't know what the weather climate's like up there, but you would think that the snow would just like one day's of snowfall would just cover footprints. They would disappear. So I mean,
Yeah,
maybe they don't get snow in February up in those mountains. I don't know. I've never been there, but that seems very unlikely to me.
no, you're right. You have a point because you're not the only one. Others also say this. The footprints might be, they say, fake, but maybe they just meant that they are not from the Dyatlov group. Um, I mean, they do lead in the direction where they were eventually found, and so they could be from them, but they could also be from somebody else, who
Yeah,
was in that area. And but since the footprints were also like from bare feet, people believe it was from them because some of them were found without shoes, which I'm going to mention later on, and they left their shoes and boots at the tent. And so who else would walk up there with bare feet? That's my question. But you have a point. I can also not quite imagine how footprints would stay that long in such a weather, in such conditions. So,
mm.
like I said, you're not the only one. The only thing that I can imagine is that those frozen footprints, like the barefoot footprints, that they would stay longer because of the frozen part of it. Like when you freeze something, it just stays longer than maybe lightweight snow that would blow away. So that could be one explanation. Um, but one witness, Brusnitsin, describes the phenomenon of the frozen column footprints differently. He says footprints can be preserved in the mountains because of the way the wind works there. you see the prints not as lowered foot imprints, but rather as raised columns, because the snow under the print is left compacted and cannot be eroded by the wind. But the area around it is scored by the wind. Then the sunrise makes the print area become even firmer, and in this way it can be preserved for the entire winter, is what he says about this.
Okay.
He's just a witness. I don't know what his profession is. If he's an experienced outdoors man, a tracker, I have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, he obviously knows a lot more about it than I do because I don't. But that's quite
Yeah.
interesting.
Now, this one writer that I mentioned from the book that I've read, they mentioned that there were signs of a struggle in the snow, but I couldn't find any other files or reports backing that. So they also said that there were signs of an object being dragged, and they show pictures in the book, but I think that could have been from anything. And since the investigation was so sloppy, it could have just been from anyone who was just trampling around that area. So I've read many times that it looked like the group was walking downhill next to each other. Every now and then, a pair of footprints would lead away from the group and for a few meters and then rejoin again. It's also not completely clear if the group was walking or running down the slope. Many statements say that it looked like they walked down the slope in a calm manner, which would not fit the cuts in the tent. That looked like somebody was trying to get outside as quickly as possible. And also, why would somebody cut open a tent from the inside and then walk down the slope calmly? That's just one of the biggest questions still unanswered from this case, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, I can imagine that they might have misinterpreted the footprints. Maybe they were running. Um, Maybe they realized the threat isn't that big and started walking instead of running. But why would they walk? I'm
Well,
going to get into this further. So far away from the tent, if they say, okay, well, the threat isn't that great, you know?
nobody would walk calmly without shoes on in the snow.
That's the next thing. Yeah. So I don't think they were just walking. Maybe that was I don't know, interpreted differently. Maybe it was just something entirely different, making them walk out of the tent. So there's so many theories. Some of them would explain that, but like I said, I'm an old skeptic. I don't quite believe them, but let's talk about them later. Now, yeah, another big question is why did they leave their outer clothes, hats, gloves, and shoes at the tent? I mean, the hikers were very experienced, like I said, and knew very well how dangerous it would be to get out the tent, probably in the darkness, with no shoes on and barely any warm clothes. Most of the hikers' friends and search group members agree that only an exceptionally serious threat might motivate physical fit experienced hikers like the Dyatlov group to leave their shelter towards an empty forest. And the quote from the website says the question apparently was retreat down the hill or the immediate and imminent death at the camp. And they say otherwise they would have never, made that decision.
I'd have to agree. Yeah, from what I've heard and seen, it doesn't seem like any other explanation than they had to run away.
Yeah, agree.
Because
Now, yeah.
well, one thing I want to know about, like, what I've got in my head is that somebody comes into the tent and is threatening them with something, and they have to leave. So they run away quickly. But why? How could somebody threaten that a group of 9 people so much to make them want to escape? They've either got to have the person threatening them either has to have some kind of weapon like a knife or a gun, or
Yeah.
or there's got to be quite a lot of them. But if they did have a knife, you would imagine that there would be some blood found because if somebody came into your tent and there was just some guy like threatening you without any weapons, then there would be a struggle and you would probably just get rid of him. But with 9 of you, but to get to the extent where you have to cut the tent open and run away, it suggests that there's some kind of weapon. Somebody's been injured. Somebody's been attacked by a knife or shot or something. But that doesn't appear to have happened. Otherwise, they would have found some evidence of that.
Now, you gotta keep in mind the investigation was done so sloppy that they didn't even check inside the tent if there was blood.
Oh.
And it didn't even dust off fingerprints or anything, so we will never know if something was injured in the tent.
Why would you not go in the tent? Well, I suppose it's all kind of collapsed, isn't it now? So it's not. But you would. You said they found
The
coffee.
tent is gone. They've
Yeah.
destroyed it and they just thrown it away, I think in the 70s, because it started to get mold on it.
Wow.
I mean, the case was closed at that time, to be fair.
Yeah.
But still, I don't think you just throw something like that out, even especially if nobody still kind of knows what happened to them. I don't know if you do that, but yeah.
It's like
Anyway, I mean,
what I imagine
yeah.
happening is if somebody comes in and attacks them and stabs someone at the front of the tent, and there's maybe a struggle with a couple of others at the front of the tent, and for the people at the back, they would judge the situation as to let's help them and contain the situation, or let's leg it and run. And if their actual only option was to run, then somebody's been injured in that tent, in my eyes. So
Yeah.
there should have been some.
Yeah, or threatened out of the tent, but that's also my theory. But I mean, I think it's nice because you're already struggling to explain all that stuff without all the other pieces that don't match anywhere.
Right. Okay.
So you're gonna be even more confused why everything is like the way it is. There's just so many things lost or don't make any sense and contradict each other that is just it's almost frustrating. You just kind of want to solve that puzzle, but there's no way you could. And well, yeah.
All right. So what's next then?
Well, next is February 27th. So I think the tent was found on February 26th. I think I made a mistake there. February 27th, 11 a.m. at a distance of 1.5 kilometers from the tent, Kopletov, or Koptelov, I'm sorry, and Sharavin found the bodies of Georgi and Yuri in a clearing under a large cedar tree. Now, the thing is, I'm quoting this from the website again. Neither Sharavin nor Koptelov, I'm sorry, neither Sharavin nor Koptelov were questioned during the investigation. Sharavin says that by the time the investigation was conducted, he was in a hospital and therefore couldn't testify. And the thing is, then why didn't they question the other guy? But still,
So
the statement.
two people found the Yuri and the other person, right? And those two people were never questioned. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, and they
the
were
next thing is,
volunteers.
the next things I believe, if I understood this correctly, I think those are the same people who found the tent earlier and didn't tell anyone. I think they also found the bodies first and didn't tell anyone. I read that somewhere. I don't know if it's those guys, if those are the correct names, but those two bodies were found earlier as well, and nobody was told.
Okay.
And those people just, without telling anyone, they left the whole mountain by, I don't know, a helicopter, I don't know, plane, just took off and never told anyone. And in the police report, nobody even bats an eye or questions them why they never told anyone about it.
Okay, that
So
seems
it's just
strange.
completely, yeah. Now, the statement in the criminal files is by Slobtsov, who found the tent the second time, and also, I believe, found the bodies and officially told someone. He said, quote, while looking carefully around the area, Mikhail Sharavin, okay, that was the other guy, noticed something dark close to a cedar tree. There was a flat area next to the cedar, and on this were remains of a fire. About 2 or 3 meters from the fire, they found Yuri Doroshenko frozen without his clothes and with his hand burned. And a little to the side, they found Georgi,
Okay.
don't mix it up, Georgi Krivonishenko in the same state. Under Doroshenko's body were 3 or 4 cedar branches about the same thickness. Now, okay, so since Slobtsov mentions Mikhail was with him, I suppose they found it at the same time, and I might have been wrong earlier. But still, Sharavin, the other guy who was with him, Mikhail Sharavin, was not questioned, just Slobtsov. Now, so describing the condition of the bodies in the official record, Vasily Tempalov, the prosecutor in the criminal case, stated, quote, Krivonishenko's right leg has no footwear. On his left foot, there is a brown sock torn. Another sock like this was discovered half burnt next to the fire. On the backs of his hands, the skin is torn. Between the fingers, there is blood. The index finger is also torn. The skin on the left shin is torn and covered in blood. There are no more visible injuries on his body. Doroshenko has woolen socks on his feet, and over these socks another lighter sock. His ear, lips, and nose are covered in blood, and on his left hand, the middle finger is bloody. Now the thing is, I'm going to go into further detail about this, how the bodies were found, and all that stuff. But that's just how what was noted initially, how they were found laying there and stuff like that. And I'll also go into detail about what is weird about injuries and all that stuff. But you can tell that they hardly wore any clothes at that point. One had burns that.
It doesn't make any sense, does it? No. Like,
No, and it gets
yeah.
even weirder. A student in the search party, Vadim Rusnitsin, I think I quoted him before, made a statement for the criminal case. Quote, next to the bodies was a fire. Nearby were more than 10 small fir tree branches, cut with a finish knife. The lower dry branches, of about 5 centimeter diameter, had been cut from the cedar. Some of these were lying next to the fire. The snow around was trampled. From Captain Chernyshov's official statement, quote, it's possible to conclude that the other people had since been by the fire. We found various garments next to it rather than on the bodies, but we didn't find any other bodies. The trees near the fire had been cut with knives, but we found no knives with the bodies. Maslenikov stated that Doroshenko and Krivonishenko, quote, maybe with the help of others, had made a pretty good fire with the branches of fir trees, but that fire had been alight for maybe an hour and a half. 8 centimeter branches of cedar had burned through, so it didn't even stay on fire for long, just for an hour and a half. And it was, yeah, people say it might have been put out by somebody, or it might have just gone out because of the wind or anything.
Yeah, I mean, fire could go out for any number of reasons at that.
Yeah. Now, don't forget that one of the bodies found next to the fire had burns on his body. I'll get into detail later, just to remind you. Atmanak, and also the branches, by the way. I don't know if I wrote that down, so I'm going to mention it now. Is that not just the dry branches were cut off, but also the tops and the young branches. So there were still green ones, and they couldn't make a fire with that, and they didn't know where those went.
Okay.
I'm going to talk about this again later, just to mention it. Atmanaki says, quote, for about 20 meters around the cedar, there was evidence of young fir trees being cut with a knife. Okay, there it is. We saw around 20 such cut stumps, but we didn't see any of the cut branches left, except for one. It isn't possible to imagine they were used to maintain the fire. First of all, they are not good for firewood. Second, around them were quite a lot of dried twigs and materials. So there it is. Wouldn't even have to mention it. The search team sent another radio message in which they stated that, quote, the volume of work done here in making this number of cuts suggests there were more people here than only these two, end quote. Maslenikov says, quote, several wool and cotton socks were scattered around the fire. There was a woman's handkerchief burned through in several places and some fragments of woolen clothes, but we didn't find the actual clothes themselves. In particular, we found the cuff of a dark sweater there, not on the bodies. Also, we found some money, 8 rubles. The tall cedar tree originally spotted by Yuri Koptelov and Mikhail Sharavin held some clues to the events of that night. The following accounts from individuals present at the scene are similar, and they bear each other out. Okay. Captain Chernyshov, quote, all the low branches of the cedar within arm's reach were broken completely. One was cut 4 or 5 meter high. They were thick. These types of branches are extremely difficult to break, even for instance you hang on them with the whole weight of your body. Maslenikov says, quote, The lower dry branches of the cedar were broken up to 2 meters high. Somebody climbed the tree because the branches 4 or 5 meter high were also broken. Manaki says, quote, most of the dry branches up to 5 meters were broken. Beside this, the side of the tree facing the slope and the tent was completely cleared of branches. These were not dry. They were young and were not used. Some of them were just lying on the ground, and the others were hanging on the lower branches of the cedar. It looked as if somebody had created a viewing height facing the side from where they came. So the cedar tree where the bodies were found were in a direct line to the tent, and the tent could be seen from the tree. The broken branches were on the side of the tree facing the tent, and the campfire was on the other side of the tent, of the tree. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
as if they didn't want to be seen from the tent. You know what I mean? Because they made the fire. Whoever made the fire made it behind the tree.
But it's not that far away from the tent
It's like
because you can see
I
it.
think it's
You can see the tent, so it
yeah, but
doesn't.
it's 1 kilometer, I believe.
Okay. So maybe that was from. Okay, so maybe the fire was made by people before they actually went to the tent. Different sets of people.
Maybe. Maybe. Who knows?
Because why would you run away from the tent and then stop and hide behind a tree and make the fire? It's like, well, I suppose you'd have to live because you'd die. You had no clothes, but it doesn't feel like they've made it
Yeah.
very far away. And it feels like if
I
they were
mean,
running away from something, that they would have been found there very easily. But
yeah, like I said, some theories could fit that. But on the other hand, yeah, maybe I mean, how far can you go when it's minus 30 degrees almost? I think
yeah,
1 kilometer is pretty far,
yeah, that's true.
given that they almost had no clothes on.
Yeah,
Um, so maybe they thought we have to stop no matter what because we're going to freeze otherwise. So it doesn't make
yeah.
any sense to run further. But yeah. Now, when the bodies were found, Yuri Doroshenko was facing down and Georgy Krivonishenko was facing up. I'll mention that again later. But they were lying directly next to each other. Yuri had burns on his foot and right temple, according to this. Georgi had burns on his left leg and left foot. On their hands were observed numerous minor injuries, bruises, and abrasions. And I'll go, like I said, into detail about the injuries later on. But the thing is that, according to some sources, I couldn't find it while researching again, but I know I read it somewhere. Somebody mentioned that they found like little, like pieces of tissue on the tree, like skin particles and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Yeah. But like I said, I can't tell for certain if that's true. Um, so yeah, let's move on. A piece from a broken ski was found 20 meters from the tent. I don't know which tree that part was. They didn't mention a pair of skis that had a broken part or anything. Now, searchers followed the footprints down the woods where all the footprints disappeared and found Sina, 630 meters from the cedar. She was laying on her right side and facing the tent as if she was heading there. Quote, she was better dressed than the bodies under the cedar. She had two hats, long sleeve undershirt, sweater, checkered shirt, and another sweater with torn off, uh, with torn off cuff on the right sleeve. It was unclear whether she cut them or it was torn by another person. Sweaters were inside out, which is not unusual for mountaineers when they try to dry clothes. Wearing them by wearing them. I'm sorry, it's really difficult because it's a quote and something has been translated, but weirdly.
No, I get it.
So they were inside out. I think not with a tag outside, but like they wear the 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 thinner clothes like t-shirts and stuff like that outside, like the top layer,
Yeah.
and like thicker clothes on the inside, which is common to make them dry better. And they also stuffed like hats and things like mittens in between those layers to keep them to help them dry and
Okay.
warm them up for the next day. So it was common. Waist down, Sinaida was wearing cotton sport pants, trousers, ski pants with three small holes at the bottom of the right trouser leg, and 3 pairs of socks. 2 pairs were thin, and the third pair was woolen with insoles inside. No footwear. In her pockets were found 5 rubles and a military-style protective mask, so like a balaclava, I think, on the left side of her chest between the top sweater and the checkered shirt underneath. And then there was blood on her back from a deep abrasion on her waist. Later, they found Igor. His body was located 300 meters from the Sita, head towards the tent again, laying on his back. Only his hands were visible over the snow, and they were clenched into fists, and the arms were bent at the elbows, so that the hands were pressed against his chest. His left arm was wrapped around a tree branch. It looks interesting. It's like he's holding on to it, in the picture.
Okay.
He was wearing a sweater, a flannel button-up shirt, a coat, long underwear, and ski pants. He had a cotton sock on one foot and a wool sock on the other. The clothing is always described a bit different in every source, but the amount of clothing is always pretty much the same. But all the sources always agree in the socks and whether they were wearing shoes or not. So that's always the same.
Yeah, okay.
So I always sometimes I couldn't decide which source to quote on the clothing, but yeah. Searchers following the footprints found a second flashlight 450 meters down the slope from the tent. It was found switched on, but the batteries had died at some point. I'm going to send you a map to also visualize where the bodies so far were found.
So none of them had any life-threatening injuries.
Well, I'll go into details about
Okay.
the injuries later on. And right now, I'm just describing the injuries as they were found, so what the searchers saw at first glance,
Okay.
Now this map shows where the tent is. It's on the top of the picture.
Yeah, I see.
And then you have the flashlight in that oval thing.
Yeah.
The second flashlight they found that was switched on, but the battery died. Then you have the access that show Kolmogorova is Sina. There's also already Rustem Slobodin on the map. I'm going to talk about him in a second. And Igor Dyatlov as the third X on the map. Then you have the cedar tree on the bottom left. So just to give you a picture of what this looked like. And I think when I first read about it, it was a bit difficult for me to imagine where everyone was laying and found, and kind of had difficulties to imagine the whole thing. And all those maps just helped lots.
Yeah, it is a better visualization.
On March 2nd, a search group of three students and 2 Menzi trackers found the hikers' storage site about a third of a mile southwest of the tent. And I'm going to show you a picture again. The storage site was a hole dug in the snow and lined with cardboard and logs. Inside the storage, they found food, a pair of boots, a pair of shoes, an ice pick, clothes, firewood, extra batteries, and Georgi's mandolin. The storage site was covered with logs and branches. 2 upright skis marked the spot. It looked like nobody had touched the storage site since it was initially built. The searchers removed the items and took them to their main camp. Now, it's unknown whose pair of skis were marking the storage site. And that's the thing where people were arguing and saying, well, they didn't have any extra pair of skis. Apparently, they had an extra pair. But, I mentioned this earlier, but there were a couple of controversies about this. And also, like I said, in the diaries, they mentioned they were too tired to set up a storage site, but eventually, at some point, they must have set one up.
Well, yeah, we're looking at it.
Yeah, otherwise there wouldn't be some. March 5th. After a week of searching between the tent and the cedar area, the searchers found Rustem Slobodin, 480 meters from the cedar. That's in the map already marked. He was laying on his stomach, facing towards the tent, and according to one source, laying in something called a corpse bed. And that one source is the book again. Now, that happens when body heat melts away the snow around someone and then refreezes into like a bed of ice. For that to happen, somebody has to be still alive when falling into the snow. None of the other bodies were found in a corpse bed. His right arm was at his side and his left arm extended. He was better dressed than the previously found hikers. Now, better dressed as in more clothes, not like fashionable.
Yeah.
Um, he was wearing a t-shirt, button-up shirt, a sweater, a jacket, long underwear, and ski pants. He had 4 socks on each foot and a boot on his right foot. His other boot was found in the tent. In his pockets, they found his passport, 310 rubles, penknife, a box of matches, and other small items. So the Sida area, Igor, Rustem, and Sina were in a straight line to the campsite, and all of them were facing headfirst towards the tent. And it looked like they were heading that direction when they died. So from the Sida area, maybe to the tent. Okay. May 5th. Throughout March and April, the search continued, but in the beginning of the search groups only had ski poles to check for bodies under the snow. Those were soon replaced with avalanche probes. That were 10 feet long with barbs at the end. And in some areas, the snow was so deep, even the avalanche probes couldn't reach the ground. So imagine with ski poles, they just poked the surface.
Yeah.
Now, as the weather has gotten warmer, just keep in mind that is May 5th. I don't know if I said March. I think that was May.
Yeah, okay. A
So
long time later now.
a long time later, yeah. Now, as the weather has gotten warmer and some snow melted, more and more items from the hikers were found. For example, a knife shaft that belonged to Alexander. Coins and other small items were found at the campsite, so around the tent. But to keep in mind, nobody knows if they were laying outside the tent already, because they could have just been maybe they've fallen out when the tent was transported back to investigate it further. So, yeah. Um, yeah, in the Sida area, they found Georgi's knife and Simeon's compass, which indicates that those two have also been at the Sida area. In the Sida area, they also found a trail of broken treetops, branches, and small broken trees that used to be buried in the snow. When the searchers followed that trail, they found a pair of black cotton sweatpants. One of the legs had been cut off with a knife but couldn't be found. Along the trail, they found more cut pieces of clothing, for example, a sweater of Luda, who was still missing at this point. After following the trail for 70 to 75 meters, they came across an open field, and in that field the snow has drifted to well over 15 feet during the winter. The searchers randomly selected some areas in the field and checked for bodies with their avalanche probes. In one of those areas, they found a makeshift type flooring, which is mostly called snow den in the official documents. The snow den was built with the missing treetops and branches from the cedar area and measured 10 square feet. On each corner of the flooring was a piece of clothing. They found the missing leg from the sweatpants they found earlier, the other half of Luda's sweater, and a pair of pants and a shirt. I'm going to send you a picture of that snow den. Now, there are many speculations. Some people think another thing is that some of the clothing that they found ripped off belonged to Yuri and Georgi, the two guys found at the Sida area. So, and they believe they were cut off from their bodies when they already died.
What to use?
I'll go into detail.
Okay.
Hmm?
What to reuse?
I mean, yeah, because many of them didn't wear many clothes and they were quite aware of the danger of the cold and probably thought, well, they don't need their clothes anymore. We need it more because we are still alive and struggling. So they might have cut it off because of that.
Okay.
Now, the website states that the snow den might have been the idea of Simeon because building such a den was common at the front. On the website, they also say, quote, the group clearly realized their threats and did everything they could to preserve themselves, end quote. Yeah, maybe it was built by them. Some other sources have a theory that maybe the snow den wasn't built by them, but by somebody else in the area. It's also not clear. Now, after finding the den, another large hole was dug 20 feet from the snow den. The hole was directly above the stream that ran through the middle of the field. A search dog alerted to a body, but nothing was found in that hole, so another hole was dug along the stream. At a depth of 14 feet, they found Luda. As the searchers carefully dug out the area around her, they also revealed the bodies of Nikolai, Simeon, and Alexander, the last 3 missing hikers. Duh. All of
Okay.
them were in a stream. The upper bodies of the three men were in the stream, and their legs were still covered by the snow. They were all laying next to each other. Luda was in a kneeling position with her head resting on top of a small waterfall. All of their heads were facing each other. I have a picture, a 3D model. Don't worry, I'm not going to show you any graphic pictures here. I know they can be disturbing. Now, this is the picture of how they were found. You can
Okay.
see Luda kneeling in the stream, and all of their faces were pretty much laying in the stream and their upper bodies. Credits to Vasily Siadik, who made this 3D model specifically for dyatlovpass.com. His website is 3dgloss.com. Just check it out. He's very talented. And this 3D model, I think, helps a lot if you don't want to look at pictures and see what it looked like. Now, Luna was wearing two sweaters, a button-up shirt, stockings, and torn, burnt pants. Those were the pants that were cut off of Georgi in the Sida area. So that's what I said. So maybe they cut it off in order to keep warm themselves, you know?
But I don't understand why they
Um,
wouldn't take off his trousers rather than cut off a bit of it.
I don't understand either. Maybe they
I mean,
maybe they just couldn't.
it could be
Maybe he was.
frozen to him or something. I don't really.
I don't
I don't know.
understand it either. I didn't know how early the rigor mortis, I think that's what the term is, sets in.
Yeah.
It's like when you get a bit stiff.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was the case. Maybe they just couldn't get it off him. I don't understand either. Maybe they were in a hurry and had
Yeah.
to hurry so much they just needed, you know, just took what they could. Now, she was also wearing a pair of torn brown socks on her feet. Nikolai was wearing two hats. One of them was tied under his chin. A t-shirt, a torn sweater, a coat, sweatpants, wool pants, and matching socks and boots on both feet. I'm just reading the clothing items so you can imagine what they wore. On his left wrist, he was wearing two watches. It's also interesting, I believe.
That is interesting.
Why would you have two watches?
Yeah.
You know, the thing is, I was thinking later on, it was revealed that all of their watches stopped. And I was like, that's interesting. That's weird. Maybe they weren't waterproof and the snow, maybe that had something to do with it. But still, it was mysterious, more mysterious than it should have been, because later on I read that somebody mentioned and said, well, maybe those were watches that you have to like twist a little button and you know what I mean?
Oh, wind up watches. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to wind up, you know, and it just maybe they just stopped because
But
nobody would wind them up anymore.
yeah, of
So it
course.
wasn't that mysterious.
No.
Simeon was wearing two hats, a t-shirt, a long-sleeved t-shirt, a sweater, a fleece jacket, a coat, long underwear, two pairs of ski pants, a pair of canvas pants, two socks on his left foot, one sock on his right foot, and a pair of boots. So he wore boots, for example. So he was one of the few, if not the only one, who had actual boots on his feet.
So
Which
why did they find 9 pairs of boots in their tent?
they had extra boots though. Some of them were in the storage.
Okay.
But yeah, you have a point. And also, that leads people to believe that he was already outside the tent when something happened and prompted the other people to leave.
Yeah, it could have been. Yeah.
Just as a note, as a side note, they found, well, proof that somebody has urinated there. So maybe he stepped out the tent, saw something, alarmed the others, and then it was just too late to properly get out of the tent. On the other hand, though, why would he, if he just steps outside to pee, close the tent again, and the others can't get out anymore? I don't know. All of their hands were severely frostbitten, but Simeon was holding a pencil in one hand and a notebook in the other hand while he was found. When he was found, there was nothing in the notebook though, but he was holding them.
Didn't write anything. Okay.
Maybe it was washed away. Keep in mind they were at least 2 weeks in that stream. They believe it was 2 weeks because probably they were laying on top of the snow in the beginning, and as the snow was melting, they slipped and they moved to the ground into the stream.
He might have been
But
far
still,
too cold to even write anything as well.
could be, yeah. But he was trying to write something down, and nobody knows what it might be, which is so frustrating.
Yeah.
Now, they also found a camera around Simeon's neck. In the tent, they found cameras that belonged to Rustem, Igor, Georgi, and Simeon. Now, this one was an unknown fifth camera nobody knew about, and nobody knows why Simeon had 2 cameras. Unfortunately, the film in the camera was ruined because it was immersed in water for such a long time. But the thing is, now the pictures way later, I think just a couple of years ago, they were developed. And there is a couple of theories about this that I'm going to talk about later. Spoilers, didn't show much, but just saying. Alexander was found wearing a t-shirt, a button-up shirt, a sweater, a fleece jacket, a coat with a burn on one sleeve and torn on the other sleeve. Shorts, 2 pairs of pants, a pair of wool socks, another sock on his right foot, and 3 additional socks on his left foot. Now imagine, those are a lot of clothes, and yet it was not enough for such a weather. Now you can imagine how cold that must be. Okay, so I have some more maps for you to make it a bit easier to understand. Now we also found the other guys. Here's the first map with also the flashlights marked in the map. I don't know how accurate those are. A lot of people speculate and say it's not exactly how they were found. So I have no idea which one is the most accurate. But you can also see the arrow pointing to the storage side.
Okay.
And what I think is interesting, there is one thing marked that kind of, I don't know, it says 15 feet high cliff. Do you see that between Igor and the rest?
Yeah.
It is so unclear. I don't know if that was actually in between the cedar area and the tent. And it was a high cliff. They say that you'd have to crawl on top of that to get to the cedar area.
Okay.
And I believe that's what it was, because otherwise you couldn't see the cedar area, the tent from the cedar tree. You know what I mean? If that was
Yeah.
a cliff down. But others also say there was a ravine behind the cedar tree, between the cedar tree and the other bodies that were last found. I don't know exactly, but if there was a cliff, 15 feet high cliff, then they must have climbed that somehow to get up to the cedar tree.
Yeah.
And must have believed they're safe up there somehow.
Yeah, it's very difficult to tell what that actually means.
I know.
But I see your point.
Here's another map to maybe make it clearer. And then I also found some pictures in the official forum on the website I'm going to show you, where you can, I think they were taken nowadays, in modern times. So on this picture, that's taken from the perspective of the tent, which is the yellow circle,
Okay.
to the cedar area, which is the green circle.
Yeah.
I have a second picture from that perspective.
I mean, ground always looks a lot flatter in photos.
Yeah, definitely.
It doesn't look very steep, does it?
No, and it wasn't very steep. It was like 30 degrees.
Okay.
And this is a picture with view from the cedar, and the yellow circle is the tent. And then you can see that it's actually a bit steeper than in the other picture.
Yeah.
But still. So it was in direct. You could see the tree from the tent and vice versa.
So actually, when I said earlier that they were, I think from this distance you could hide. If they had run and decided they needed to hide, this is actually quite far away to have been able to hide from somebody at the tent. It's not like,
yeah,
just the way I was imagining it before. They hadn't made it very far, but that is quite far.
Especially because there's like a foresty area.
Yeah. So
and some trees might have covered them a bit and provided some shelter at least, or maybe at least some place where they could hide.
That makes a lot more sense, yeah. Okay, everyone, so I'm going to leave the episode here. Thank you for listening. There will be a part 3 and a part 4 coming up, so be sure to tune into those. But thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.